This is a movie that doesn't need to exist. Alright, so for this week's retro review, I decided to take a look at Terminator Genisys, and ordinarily when I'm reviewing a movie, I don't like to compare it to the previous movies in the franchise if it is a part of a franchise. That's whether it's a sequel, prequel, or even a reboot. Naturally, if it's a sequel, prequel, or it's a continuation of an existing story, then you have to look and see whether the story in the movie that you're reviewing lines up with what was previously established. But when it comes to this movie, which kind of acts as a sequel slash reboot of the Terminator franchise, it's almost impossible to look at it as its own thing because the movie itself is constantly reminding you of the previous movies in the Terminator franchise with constant callbacks and almost similar story beats throughout the movie. The only problem though is not only are they constantly reminding me of the previous movies in the Terminator franchise, but they're just constantly reminding me that the previous movies in the franchise had handled the exact same story beats and effects, but did it in a lot more satisfying manner, and they did it decades earlier. So let's take a look at this one. The movie starts in the future with John Connor and Kyle Reese fighting in the final battle with the machines, which the machines ultimately lose when Skynet's headquarters is destroyed. But before the machines go offline, they send a Terminator unit back in time to kill Sarah Connor. So Kyle Reese volunteers to go back in time to protect her, setting the stage for the first movie. This is where things start deviating because as Kyle Reese is being sent back, he witnesses a Terminator unit attacking John, but he's unable to do anything before being transported back to 1984. Things initially play out how we remember in the original movie, but they dramatically change once we learn that not only did Skynet send back a T-800 unit to 1984 to kill Sarah Connor, but they also sent back a T-1000 unit to kill her as a child in 1973. Kyle comes across this T-1000 unit, and this is where we get the next twist. There was a T-800 unit that was reprogrammed and sent back to 1973 to protect Sarah Connor as a child. Who programmed this T-800 unit to go back and protect Sarah as a child? Don't know. It's even specifically asked by Kyle in the movie, and no answer is given. I think the writers might have imagined that this was something they would answer in a future sequel, but since we never got a sequel, this is just kind of a hanging plot thread. Since Sarah grew up with this Terminator protecting her against this T-1000, she calls him Pops. I'm not going to use that name because I just find it ridiculous. So for the purpose of this review, I'm just going to refer to this particular Terminator unit as Arnold for the rest of it. Sarah and Arnold used the 11 years they spent together to prepare for the future. They ambush the first T-800 unit as it arrives in 1984 and quickly kill it before rescuing Kyle from the T-1000 and drawing it to a trap that they set up at a hideout. I'm not sure why they didn't kill this T-1000 unit sooner because he did go down pretty easily and he really wasn't much of a threat, but he still could have thrown a wrench in their plan, especially if he was able to kill Kyle Reese. But anyway, after they got rid of him, then at this point they jump forward in time because apparently Sarah Connor and Arnold are able to develop a time machine that sends them forward in time back in 1984. They say they needed the chip from the T-800 unit, so they couldn't have just done it at any time, but still, I think it's pretty remarkable that they are able to actually build a working time machine at that time period. In this movie's timeline, Skynet is a company called Genisys, and it's set to go online in the year 2017. Sarah and Kyle travel forward to 2017 with Arnold staying back because he was damaged, so he'll meet them in the future. After arriving in 2017, Sarah and Kyle are arrested but are freed by an adult John Connor who was sent back in time. Once Arnold catches up with Sarah, John, and Kyle, he shoots John. And this is where the next big twist of the movie happens because apparently at the start of the movie when that Terminator unit attacked John Connor, what it did is it transformed John into a Terminator unit by injecting his body with nanomachines which take over all of his cells. And then Skynet sent John Connor back in time to 2014, and his job is to make sure that Genisys or Skynet goes online. So the rest of the movie has Arnold, Kyle, and Sarah on the run from this now terminized John Connor who's trying to stop them from destroying Skynet, and they're trying to stop Skynet from going online. In case you haven't guessed, this movie is basically just trying to be Terminator 2 Judgment Day, except if you sucked out all the life from it, this is the movie you get. In fact, I think an appropriate comparison would be to say this movie is like a T-1000 in that it killed Terminator 2 and is trying to parade around disguised as it, except since it's a machine and just very corporate and artificial, it has no life in it. That's why it feels so sterile while watching it. Even all the actors seem to be phoning in their performances. J.K. Simmons is completely wasted in the role and then basically forgotten about. Jason Clarke, I usually like him, but he doesn't seem to have a whole lot to work with. Jai Courtney is probably the only actor I can believe is genuinely trying to give a good performance, but the dude can't act at all, which is a wonder why this movie is trying to focus around him and Emilia Clarke's character. She's fine in some roles, but she's completely out of her depth in this movie. There's no way I could actually believe that she's a tough warrior woman, even if she was training since she was a child. Just look at the way she's flinching while firing this gun. This isn't necessarily meant to be a knock on her particularly, because a lot of actors do the same thing, but compare it to Robert Patrick in Terminator 2 when he was unloading his Beretta near the start of that movie, how he kept his eyes open the whole time. This is someone who spent a lot of time training in order to try to make sure he looks like he knows what he's doing. Meanwhile, Emilia Clarke has supposedly been training since she was a little kid, but she doesn't look like she knows how to handle a gun. There's even a part in the movie where they just show her holding a Barrett 50 cal, and the rifle is about as big as her, and there's no way I can believe that she can hold her own in a fight, even with all the firearms in the world. I also don't buy her and Jai Courtney's relationship in this movie because they have zero chemistry between them. And throughout the movie, she's trying to come across as some type of girl boss, but unlike Linda Hamilton in the original movies, she can't pull it off convincingly because she doesn't have the screen presence to do it. And Arnold, he's more or less just relegated to a background character. He's taking a back seat to Emilia Clarke and Jai Courtney. And it seems like he doesn't even care for this movie either, because in Terminator 2, he's genuinely trying to give a decent performance and he has some nuance. But in this one, it seems like he's just phoning it all in order to collect the paycheck. In fact, it probably would have been cheaper for the producers if they would have just used a CGI Arnold. After all, it's not like they were afraid of using CGI because it was all over the place in this movie. Granted, there are certain situations where it's unavoidable, like showing the T-1000 transforming. They had to use CGI in the 1991 Terminator 2. But in this movie, the CGI was used so excessively throughout the movie, it just takes you out of it, whether it's a bad green screen background or the helicopter chase near the third act of this movie. And when I was watching that, all I was thinking of, Terminator 2 was so much better because they had the leads in a truck running away from a helicopter, and they had an actual stunt helicopter with a crazy pilot doing all the maneuvers in there. And I was thinking, what I'm watching here in Terminator Genisys is basically just them trying to elevate it by like, oh, we had a helicopter and a chasing a truck in Terminator 2. This time it's two helicopters chasing each other and they're shooting at each other. I'm like, that doesn't make it better because it's clearly a fake scene. And in fact, this is pretty much a problem that I saw throughout most of this movie. They're just trying to replicate popular scenes from the previous movies, but trying to up the ante. But by doing that, all they're doing is making it look more fake, because in the previous movies, especially Terminator 2, they basically did it as best as you can with the practical effects. So the only way you can up the ante, you're inevitably going to have to resort to CGI, and that's not going to make it look more engaging. It's just going to make it look more phony. This movie's the definition of people trying to stand on the shoulders of giants in order to make themselves feel tall. Like I said at the start of this review, there's really nothing to this movie. It's pretty much just a rehash of better Terminator movies, but with all the life sucked out of it. And it's a prime example of what happens when studios are just trying to make a sequel or reboot or something to a franchise that they own the rights to in order to try to turn a quick profit. And in fact, if there's anything redeeming about this movie, it's that it's an example as to why you shouldn't do such a thing. By all means, if you have an idea for a story to continue on with something, then make a movie about it, but don't just do it because you want to turn a profit, because this is what you get. And that's why I'm giving Terminator Genisys a 2 out of 10. But let me know what you think about this movie in the comment section below. Do you actually like Terminator Genisys, or do you also hate this movie? In fact, leave a comment. Let me know what you think the worst Terminator movie is in the franchise. I would ask what you think the best Terminator movie is, but we all know it's Terminator 2, no question about it. And I will fight anyone who says otherwise. And if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news, or check out some more of my movie reviews. And if you haven't already, make sure you click that like button and share the video out there with your friends, because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.